In this discussion video, we're going to, in detail, link the separate realities of the material world and the spiritual world, which is to say, the organic and the inorganic. Now, to set that up, in order to do that, we're going to refer back to a little bit to some of the material in the previous discussion videos. And one of those was the installation of the mind, which we knew happened around the time of birth. Remember, we recalled then that this installation of the mind made it a rather foreign installation. But at the same time that the mind was then installed, then it is in the mind that the seed of awareness was implanted. Prior to birth, we didn't have any awareness. We didn't have any awareness of this three-dimensional reality. But after certain recognitions, then the mind comes into play, and installed in the mind is the initial seed of awareness. And then because of commitments that we've each made, it is each and every person's sole purpose to attend to this seed, to nurture and grow their awareness. You might consider our world very much a garden of awareness. Actually, a garden which is self-perpetuating and continually harvested. Now, we haven't talked about the harvesting, but we will get into that later on in other video discussions. So, understanding the function of the mind requires us to understand the environment in which it was placed. With the advent of birth, then, we enter into the environment where the paradox is the paradigm. And once again, remember, we discussed the paradox in previous video discussions. So it is within the paradigm of the paradox that confusion in the mind runs rampant. So just to reiterate and review a little bit, we're going to speak of the phenomena of the paradox. And suffice it to say that the paradox is, as it would be defined in the dictionary, that which seems self-contradictory or on the face value of it an absurdity. It's an extension of our considering the importance of our organic and inorganic natures simultaneously being the most important aspect of our lives. So each of us personally enters the world with a functioning biological body, organic in nature. From our sensory perspective, everything is organic or material. However, similar to the reality in physics, there is matter and antimatter. Our environment consists with an organic side as well as an organic side. From this inorganic, or to casually say spiritual side, there are inorganic realities, just like our organic reality. So we have a material reality and a spiritual reality. And in the inorganic reality, there are beings and more dimensions that form a completely separate reality. Now, we're linked to the organic to the inorganic reality through the channel of the will, which is processed in the mind. In fact, we represent the final part of the organic link in the food chain. Death then carries across dimensions the very awareness which is, in terms of the chain, consumable. Now remember, in the previous video as well, we discussed the rather unique nature that knowledge belongs in the organic or material world. And to some extent, because it's processed in the mind, we then actually accept that knowledge itself is organic. But from the inorganic side then, from the spiritual side, the awareness, which, again, remember that was the seed that was implanted, and that's what we are trying to grow to fruition. That's the fruit of our labors, our awareness. Well, awareness on the spiritual side is a substance. Now, that's not an organic substance, so again, you have to deal with the paradox here, and the mind, of course, doesn't like that, and our rationality and logic doesn't like that a whole lot, but until we get further into the discussions, we just accept that on the material side, knowledge is organic, and on the inorganic side, the spiritual side, awareness is, in fact, a substance. And not only that, it is this substance, this awareness that we've grown as the fruit of our awareness that actually transcends the portal of death. So death then carries across dimensions the very awareness which is, again, in terms of the chain, consumable. So within this environment which perpetuates awareness, the mind is installed with both organic and inorganic connections. And to ponder this critical understanding, consider how the environment looks from a bigger picture. First, on the largest scale, if we were to diagram the process, and that's what we're going to do right now to link these separate realities, it would be that everything under nature's umbrella of the food chain is what we are discussing. Therefore, nature is going to be at the top of our diagram. So if you're diagramming this on a piece of paper, you just started out with nature. And that's why we keep referring to nature as being supreme and nature being all-encompassing. It's over everything. Death is natural. After death is natural. Life is natural. Before birth is natural. There is nothing that nature doesn't encompass. So in our diagram here, nature is going to be at the top of the diagram as we begin to link these separate realities. Below nature then, on the left and right halves, would be two different segments, and eventually these two segments are going to get connected. There'll be connected links, so to speak. But the segment on the left would be our world, which we call the organic three-dimensional reality. Directly across from this half of the page would be the link on the right half, defined as the next reality or the inorganic reality. One thing to keep in mind is, just as links suggest an interconnection, as in links of a physical chain, at any point in time, some of one link is always within the limits of the other. So now that you have these two halves of your diagram under nature, the left half being being organic and the right half being inorganic links on the diagram, there would have a vertical line drawn between them. Now at the midpoint down the page on this vertical line would be, and we'll just put these labels and bubbles, so that's how we'll construct our diagram. So midway down, halfway down, this vertical line that separates the organic from the inorganic would be a bubble labeled will. So that is our will. So it is the will passing through the channel of intent, and I know we haven't talked about that, but intent is a critical key to our spiritual communications. The will passes through the channel of intent, and it is that channel of intent that connects, or from a quantum physics reality, entangles the organic to the inorganic in a functional reality. This is exactly where the links interconnect. And remember, what we're trying to do here is to construct the linking of these separate realities and their components so that we know how to build the functional reality, and we kind of have a feeling for what we are trying to accomplish to make the spiritual communication and the spirit just as alive to us as is the organic side. So let's talk about the organic side. On the organic side, on the far left of the diagram, so this is the left half, a bubble would be placed labeled birth. In this video discussion, we're not going to go before birth. We're going to start at birth. So we would label a bubble birth, which is to us specifically a three-dimensional experience. Then next to this bubble or element that we have labeled birth, it would be connected directly to the right of it would be the mind. So we would have a bubble labeled the mind seated with awareness. This, of course, represents the installation of the mind, and the mind being the functional component automatically appointed actually to socialize and by choice capable of choosing to search for awareness beyond the organic side. Then continuing on the diagram, to the right of the mind is a bubble labeled reason, talking, and being. Now, remember, in this discussion video, we're only linking these. We're not going into detailed discussions about all the functionalities, but it is all the functionalities of these that make up the complete nature, which is, again, at the top of the diagram. So this constitutes the beginning of the functionality, our functionality, developing these aspects within the organic link. And as we continue after birth, these aspects and this element, reason, talking, and being, they will, again, by order of nature and by the path of least awareness, begin to have their reason, logic, and belief systems socialized, because that is exactly what happens after we're born. Immediately we begin to be socialized into this organic reality. So again, continuing on, after the bubble labeled reason, talking, and being on the organic side, right to the right of that would be a label or a bubble labeled events and beliefs. It is at this element, this bubble, where the paradox in which we exist manifests itself. In the diagram, the bubbles appear this way. Above the bubble, events and beliefs, would be another connected bubble labeled awareness of the world. Then, below the bubble containing events and beliefs is another connected bubble that is labeled awareness of purpose. It is the exact relationship of these three vertical bubbles that creates the paradox. The paradox is created by the situation where the middle bubble, events and belief, services both the bubbles above and below it. On the diagram, the paradox represents the entire left half, and it would be placed as a label directly below the organic link. But don't worry about labeling the paradox. Just make sure that you have the bubble with the three vertical bubbles, of which to the right of reason, talking, and being then is events and beliefs. Then above events and belief is awareness of the world. Below events and beliefs then is awareness of purpose. And so, why is it a paradox? Well, in other words, it is the events of our lives, just the normal, ordinary, everyday events of our lives, that cause us to socialize our awareness of the world, while at the same time being the foundation for gaining awareness of purpose. Remember, if we use different language, we might call the events of our daily living ordinary. And what this is saying is that, remember, our ordinary events are used for the spirit or the inorganic side to communicate extraordinary awareness. Kind of what we went over in the previous video, discussion video. But the point here is the paradox is established because the one and same event that is ordinary in our lives is also extraordinary. The same one that serves our social organic side, that same event serves our spiritual and inorganic side. And they are both supreme at the same time. Again, if we related it to the physics, this would be somewhat similar to matter and antimatter. They're both of supreme importance. So one especially big challenge is that of correctly interpreting worldly social activities as being the same events that provide signs, omens, and opportunities of greater awareness. So again, continuing along with our diagram, to the right of events and beliefs would be a bubble labeled feeling, dreaming, and seeing. And again, I'll just mention very cursorily here that we are perceivers by nature. We perceive, we tend to see. We both have sight from the organic side where we see things, and we also think of ourselves as having insight. That insight is more of a spiritual type of nature, an inorganic type of nature. And during our growth, we come to find out that from the organic side, when we see things, then we feel them. So if we see that a child is suffering, then we feel that as well. On the inorganic side or the spiritual side, actually it's just a mirror of that, but the processing is entirely different. And you have to learn to functionalize the spirit in this different way. The spirit, or the inorganic side, you feel to see. You feel the truth, and then you can see the truth. But we don't want to get too heavily into that. We are just diagramming, connecting these realities, so we want to stay on track. So from all the bubbles that we've labeled so far and connected, especially on the organic side, and connected to events and beliefs, a confluence of factors and incidents occur that will perpetuate into a belief system. And that's, again, part of our socialization process. But it is from this belief system that the intent with which we use our energy and how we determine our action and gestures are performed and developed. And remember, as we said earlier, intent is a critical part of our understanding the paradox and actually resolving it. And as we said earlier and placed our label, remember the label that was midway down the vertical line connecting the two halves, we had the will, and the intent is channeled. This is literally what happens. This is how communication takes place. We talked about the entanglement, but this intent, our intent, is channeled in a constant stream from the will, or of the will, from both the organic to the inorganic, and actually from the inorganic back to the organic side. So the will that is placed halfway down this vertical line that separated the organic from the inorganic, this will is your will, but it is also a greater will. Okay, so now let's connect these two realities, the organic to the inorganic. So on the diagram, as we just talked about, the bubble of the will in the middle of the page is in a channel that connects the bubble, the last one we labeled, being feeling, dreaming, and seeing, to the first bubble on the inorganic side. In other words, it connects the organic reality to the inorganic reality. So this is how one of the direct ways that our awareness is attended to from the inorganic side, or the spiritual side of reality, of our individual being, because there is a direct connection through the will for the growth of awareness. So these events, and you could also label them destiny in a way, that are for awareness, are manifested to the organic side from the inorganic side. It is the nature and purpose of the entire system, grand to minute, to nurture, grow, and return awareness. So remember, we talked about the different aspects of seeing, how on the organic side we see to feel, and on the inorganic side we actually feel to see. Well, it's also from the vantage point of the bubble labeled feeling, dreaming, and seeing. It depicts the channel of intent directly as a conduit through the will. And it is through these, through your intent, through your will, through your growing awareness of how you dream, how you feel, how you see, how you manage your intent, that the power and the clarity of your purpose for being here and your intent on awareness is actually deliberated. And as we mentioned, it's a communication, an actual communication, although it gets translated from the reverse polarities of feeling to see and seeing to feel. It is through this channel of intent that communication takes place, because our will from the organic side is then entangled with the will from the inorganic side, which is a higher will. And this entanglement links the organic and the inorganic aspects of our being under nature. So because of this direct link, our intent and will are constantly apparent in the inorganic or the spiritual side of our nature, which actually then guides our destinies and seeks to increase our awareness. Actually, it's because of this channel of intent and the entanglement that no action, no thought, no gesture escapes the process of being human and being guided to a growing awareness. In other words, it might be well summarized, which is kind of biblical, that our needs are known before they're asked. However, it's precisely at this point that we do have direct communication and should ask, according to the understanding of our awareness, for guidance, which again is somewhat biblical. So if we ask, we will receive. The effect of asking in having this direct communication, the results of this asking through evaluations of intent are presented through feeling, dreaming, and seeing, as well as through actions and gestures and events. And these ordinary events, again, are simultaneously, paradoxically, can be extraordinary in nature, and they may also be interpreted as signs, omens, and agreements, which I know we haven't talked about these yet, so that'll be for a further video discussion. And it's our understanding of these relationships and these functionalities which eventually cause us to codify into a belief system on the organic side and eventually become aware of the relationship on the inorganic side or the inorganic reality as well. So we have perceptions on both the organic side and the inorganic side, and then we have a coherent map of nature's complete reality for our perception, which is our three-dimensional reality and our spiritual reality. So I think that that would be a good place for us to conclude our video discussion here, because now you have a good idea of what these components of being human and also being spiritual look like, connected, how they're connected together, how they're functionalized. There is a bit more on the inorganic side, but that will be for another discussion. So until the next discussion, let's look for peace, comfort, and awareness.